You might be wondering why on Wednesday did the Bitcoin spike to 100,000 and then pull back. Well, my friend, it looks like it's because of our buddy Jerome Money Printer Powell. I just want to play a clip here from him at the DealBook Summit. I think he's been interviewed by Andrew Sorkin here. Just a quick 20 seconds just to hear what he says about Bitcoin.
People use Bitcoin as a speculative asset, right? It's like gold. It's just like gold, only it's virtual, it's digital. People are not using it as a form of payment or as a store of value. It's highly volatile. It's not a competitor for the dollar. It's really a competitor for gold. You know, that's really how I think of it.
All right, I'm going to play that one more time. We're short. Just hit on the points that he's comparing it to gold, and he's saying how it's not a currency. Just want to play the 20 seconds one more time.
People use Bitcoin as a speculative asset, right? It's like gold. It's just like gold, only it's virtual. It's digital. People are not using it as a form of payment or as a store of value. It's highly volatile. It's not a competitor for the dollar. It's really a competitor for gold. You know, that's really how I think of it.
It's a competitor for gold.
That's right.
So, how much Bitcoin is the government about to purchase?
Exactly.
That is the next question.
That's right. Now he tried to sort of like he's thinking on the fly here, but this is the first time I've heard Jerome Powell clearly state that he thinks Bitcoin is like gold.
How much Bitcoin do you think Powell owns? That's a question for the comments here as well. He's got to own some.
That's right.
He's got to own some. Yeah. He would have to reveal that on public statements, right?
Not only if he owns it directly.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
All right. Here's the thing. Okay. So, he might flippantly say, well, it's like gold. Okay, fine. Gold is the other reserve asset that central banks hold. They hold currency, they hold treasury bonds, and then they hold. And if they're going to hold Bitcoin, then that means they're going to have to start collecting billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And we've already started seeing some central banks around the world saying this. And the fact that he just saying nonchalantly, I mean, I've watched, I think, everything Jerome Powell has said publicly for the last 5 years. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And he said this super casually, and it was such a news that Bitcoin spiked to 100,000, right? He also says a contradictory statement here. He says it's like gold, but Bitcoin's not used as a currency and it's not used as a store of value. Well, that's what gold is.
It's that last part that was actually interesting to me, that he doesn't see Bitcoin being used as a store of value, when I think that there's a fair amount of the cryptocurrency market that does see it as a store of value. But in notional terms, in trading volume terms, he's right. Most people are speculating on the trading volume or the trading activity around crypto, which is what elevates its volatility and makes it an interesting asset class to begin with.
Right, but then he wouldn't say it's like gold, because that's how people trade gold.
Which is the part I'm having trouble reconciling, because if he sees it as a competitor to gold, then you would inherently have to see it as a store of value.
That's right. So gold's value is a store of value, or he said it's not as currency, or as a jewelry or industrial usage.
But he was also clarifying that he sees people. He was saying people don't see it as a store of value, which doesn't mean that the government's stance isn't that they don't see it. They probably do see it as a store of value, is my point.
Well, it has to be literally the only characteristic of gold that he could even be referring to when he's saying that Bitcoin is like gold. If it's virtual and it's not used in industrial practices or in jewelry, only other use for gold is a store of value.
Now, as a reminder, the government already owns an incredible amount of Bitcoin. They own about 200. Yes, that all came from forfeitures for the most part. But they own about 213,000 Bitcoin at this point. And there doesn't appear to be any expectation that they're going to offload that Bitcoin that I'm aware of. Have you heard anything to that effect?
No. In fact, RFK and the campaign trail were saying that the Trump administration should buy more.
Right.
Yeah,
add it to the Treasury.
Exactly.
Could you imagine a Fed's mandate that they have to start owning more Bitcoin?
Unbelievable. Incredible that the Bitcoiners were absolutely right. I cannot believe in my lifetime they're saying the multiple members of the American government are saying, hey, look, Bitcoin maybe we should be having it. I mean, the price, the adoption rate that we're seeing, the prices, the quotes we've had for Bitcoin, let's say 150,000, 200,000, 500,000. If the U.S. government starts buying gold as a reserve asset, that means every other central bank is going to start doing the same.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think my theory that Bitcoin is not in this long-term power curve, that what we are is really that Bitcoin's been in a bull flag since the beginning. That means we break out from the bull flag, and the pull up will be the same length as all the gains of Bitcoin, literally from the beginning to now.
Mm-hmm.
So now the claims, the Cathy Wood claims, the Saylor claims, the Max Kaiser claims of Bitcoin at astronomical levels is like conservative if central banks start buying Bitcoin.
It is. I think what concerns me, and this has been tough. I know you know for a long time now, I've also been one of the major speculators in the crypto space, and I've never seen the long-term value of cryptocurrency the way that maximalists have. The more I've heard from Saylor, though, especially now that we've been covering some of his content, I'm like, okay, this guy's got me a little bit convinced that there's something here that I'm not really thinking about from a 100, 200 year perspective, as you consider the potential that that Bitcoin really has. And by the way, Bitcoin is really the only one that has these properties that we're describing. Of all the other cryptocurrencies out there, it's the only one that actually makes sense to me, and to Saylor for that matter, which is why he's a Bitcoin maxi. But the larger question I end up having is, imagine a world in which there is no competition for a dominant country-based currency as our store of value anymore, by which we denominate our trade across the world. That means there's no competition of the US dollar versus BRICS nations. We're effectively all transacting across the same denominated currency. What does that look like to you if we start using Bitcoin to transact in that way?
Well, I don't think it can actually be used as a currency because the limited nature of the Bitcoin, the supply, and so there's no elasticity because there's no inflation rate to it.
Mm.
And so people argue you have this infinite divisibility, but that's actually deflationary. Um, so, but as a reserve asset, it makes a huge amount of sense because then it adds a
So you see it being as partially used as a reserve asset to their currency within their nation. So maybe you've got gold as part of your reserve, and Bitcoin is maybe a portion of that reserve as well.
exactly. What Bitcoin, just to push back on what you're saying before about the idea that Bitcoin's the only one that can do this. I think the reason why that's the case now is that there's just too much risk in order to focus on the other utility cases that the other coins have been bringing. Some of the value that those things have been bringing has actually been pretty interesting, just doesn't have the adoption rate. So think of it in terms of asynchronous JavaScript, right? Asynchronous JavaScript has existed for a long period of time, but people didn't really put a lot of effort into it because the technology, the computer technology, didn't get to the point where it really made sense to do that. But as soon as it got to the level where we had enough space in the computer, we had enough processing power, and we needed to be able to perform actions asynchronously, then JavaScript was revived, and we had this async thing, this feature within the browser that could be used. And now to find apps that don't have live reload and JavaScript information, and can you imagine if every time you clicked on an email, I had to refresh the entire page? Like now we'd be like, oh, that's ridiculous. But then it opens up other avenues, other things that we could have done, but we didn't do before. So I think in the crypto space is the same thing. The Bitcoin is proof that a digital asset can be treated like a physical thing.
So I think you're right. When I think about other cryptocurrencies, I see them as solutions to other technological problems.
That's right.
The way we transact, the way that we create contracts with one another, the way that we create rewards. We can, leverage, like Ethereum contracts to create an agreement between parties in which the final transaction is then released, and it serves as a form of a trust, or escrow, if you will. And I get the transaction layer around that, and the technology can be leveraged in that way. Peter made a point here in the comments. He sees Cardano as the currency and Bitcoin as the reserve asset, and I'm inclined to agree. Where I see the value of other cryptocurrencies from a technology standpoint, but I don't see other countries adopting a different type of cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin as a reserve asset. If we're speaking in those terms, your thoughts there?
I think it's I think we have to not do our version of boomer thinking, that we have
Boomer
to,
thinking.
yeah, like, or like the when we were in school, they would say stuff like, you can't rely on the calculator because sometimes the calculator makes mistakes, and you have to know how to do this all manually. You're not gonna have a calculator all the time, and obviously now we have a calculator all the time. Um, the benefits that we're having, the things that the cryptocurrencies, other cryptocurrencies, allow us to do are things that are just not like anything we're used to conceptualizing. In the same way that uh, when Craigslist first started, I don't know if you remember when Craigslist first started, it just exploded. It was like people were like, "Wait, what? I could just post directly and be in contact with other people. I don't have to go through a third thing. I could just literally arrange to go buy a toaster from someone, the neighborhood over, and I could just get a toaster for $20 that would have cost me $60." And
It's the
yeah,
only way I buy toasters, by the way.
right. But do you remember how it was just like people just had wrapped their heads around? They're like, okay, but it's not secure and it's dangerous, so you're going to meet random people or whatever. And then people are like, no, 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 we'll figure out a way of making this safe for ourselves. Have different communities, have different ways of using it. And it was sort of, but do you remember how it was hard to like replicate that at first? At first, like, it was years before we got Facebook Marketplace.
Mhm.
It was years before we got eBay the way it was, where it's like a whole industry in and of itself. So for me, Bitcoin is like Craigslist at first, where conceptually we're like, okay, how do we get this? Oh, it turns out if Bitcoin is like used on the balance sheet of a company, that might change the way that the company operates, because now we have an asset that's the Michael Saylor route. Oh, it turns out if we have Bitcoin as a back and wrap Bitcoin um, in some sort of uh, art, a digital art, that somehow now that might be unique and valuable in itself. Oh, so we're trying to figure out this material that we created. So to me, it's very much like when human beings started with metalworking. We had iron, we had copper. We started with metalworking, and then we figured out, oh, alloys. Oh, steel is actually way better, but we have to learn how to forge with steel. And then all of a sudden, oh, steel has this property that if you break it and reforge it, it's stronger than the steel that was there beforehand. Oh my God. And so I think we're going to find these sort of like the alloy version of this, but we're getting out of the Stone Age, and we're just learning about the base metals, Bitcoin, and we're touching on these other things. And once we figure out actually how to do it, we'll have a whole new arsenal.
So I think that's a fair and accurate statement. Just because of the potential any cryptocurrency has to provide additional value beyond just being a reserve asset. Because we're talking about software driven assets here, that means we can write the software to do whatever we want, which might mean that as a sovereign entity, I might want the currency to behave a certain way in which I can write that into the protocol. And we could be looking at another protocol in the future that solves specific problems that occur at a governmental level when it comes to using that currency. For example, maybe you wanted to be able to, use it as a reserve currency, but also it needs to be able to track its use within the rest of the currency network, right, by which its reserve is based on. I'm having a hard time conceptualizing other avenues, but I think what I'm saying is the technology can be built any way we want it to. So I agree with you that maybe something in the future could replace the current winner, if you will. But I believe the reason Bitcoin is the winner is largely because of its stability. It's not a project that is going to disappear anytime soon. It's had the most notional trading volume. It has the properties that give it its reserve value, because there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. And I think the simplicity of it makes it really, really attractive. Some of these other projects end up going so far that they've almost introduced so much complexity that they're not as attractive as a result.
Well, so for example, Bitcoin does not have any privacy to it, right? Big problem we're having. We're going to talk about Haktua in a second. This is a big problem. We can trace everything that's going on inside of the crypto networks. Actually,
which is, it's a good thing and a bad thing, right?
Right. But it makes it so that it's completely unusable in certain other circumstances, right? Like a central bank's not going to want people to know what they're doing with the cryptocurrency, like their holdings of Bitcoin. So we need some other mechanism. So, for example, I'm excited by Midnight that's being created by the Cardano network that allows for um, uh, zero knowledge proofs. So all the benefits of the confirming transactions within crypto, but privacy layers. We're going to see cryptocurrencies that are specific for, let's say, voting systems. Can you imagine if our election systems had it and everyone could just vote from their phones and we could all see confirm the validate the vote, but without divulging who we voted for? I can't wait to see that happen. But that requires its own crypto. We can't use Bitcoin for that. And there's all these different use cases. The BitTorrent to be incentivized to share files, new ways for people to cryptocurrencies that are tied to different units within the AI space, so that you can get paid for when an AI uses part of a book that you wrote. Attribution wise, there's all these different ways that Bitcoin just can't solve. What Bitcoin is doing is proving to us that we can actually go down this path in the same way that Maxwell's laws allow us to understand, hey, we can actually do telecommunication abroad in a completely different way. We don't need to send some guy on a horse with a letter to someone else. So that's where I think we're at right now, and I don't see anything because of Bitcoin's shortcomings. I think it's a promise that we're going to have other competing cryptocurrencies that do different things that are just as important, just as well known as Bitcoin.